which goes as environment and sustainable development. This is the last portion, this is the last chapter for our unit of current challenges. Do we have anyone who wants me to revisit something else first?
Ma'am,
Anji?
this employment chapter and infrastructure chapter, there are a lot of factual things that we need to understand. But how to learn these chapters? Because there is nothing to learn. There are general things or factual things or dates and figures.
ठीक है, I'll tell you one thing. For employment you've said, infra you've said, there's one more I believe. Acha, inflation is no longer there. All right, if you go through the book, they have a lot of data based interpretations there. Things you cannot really learn the data, things that you should know, basically just the trends. When I say trends, itna pata hona chahiye that maybe say you have more women of the rural area engaged in employment as compared to the urban area. Or if you're looking at, or what they can do, they can give you a table and they can ask you to interpret. Whenever you have interpretation based questions, we always have to offer our reasoning as to why do we think this is the case. So when we did employment also, if you remember, we were interpreting a diagram, उसको हम नॉर्मल लेमैन लैंग्वेज में लिख रहे थे, एंड देन वी वर ऑफरिंग possible reasons as to why do we think this trend is there. That is a very common way of asking questions when it comes to employment. For infrastructure, there's not as much as it was there in employment. Infrastructure still has a little content when it comes to meaning, when it comes to economic and social infrastructure. You don't have the case study of energy anymore. So that basically leaves you with the case study of health. Health में भी questions आ जाते हैं. I'll tell you what kind. One, we can ask about what are the alternative medicines that India promotes, that is the Indian system of medicine, where we spoke of the Ayush system. Then we can talk about the urban rural divide. Why do we have that divide? Why do we have the rich poor divide? We can then talk about the role of the private sector. We can then ask for limitations of the public sector. We can ask for the state of the women when it comes to health infrastructure. Or I can overall ask you to offer me a critique for the health infrastructure of the country. So infrastructure still has certain content which needs to be in place and not so much based on data. Employment has a lot based on data and little content. Employment में क्या content आ सकता है? We can ask type of workers, जहाँ पर आप बताते हो hired या self-employed. Hired में भी आप bifurcation दे सकते हो. I can ask about casualization. I can ask you to offer me reasons for casualization. I can ask efforts made by the government to reduce casualization of workforce, where we speak that you have international organizations intervening and labor laws were brought in. Then I can ask about unemployment. Unemployment में भी आप types बताओगे. So we have seasonal, disguised, open unemployment. Then we can ask what exactly has the government done so far to tackle the problem of unemployment, जो आपके unemployment chapter में explicitly नहीं है. उसके लिए आपको जाना पड़ेगा poverty में, जहाँ पे वहाँ पे they've mentioned poverty alleviation programs. So mixing the same content. That basically means poverty का content can also be used to answer employment का question. Similarly, जब हमने health वो किया है, ह्यूमन कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन किया है, उधर हमने बात करी थी सोर्सेज ऑफ ह्यूमन कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, जिसमें से एक सोर्स था हेल्थ. हेल्थ वहां पर हमने सिर्फ इंट्रोड्यूस किया था. वी डिड नॉट स्टडी हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर देयर एज मच. वी स्टडीड हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड स्टेट ऑफ आर development for health in forms of capital formation in lesson of infrastructure. That basically means जब आप infrastructure पढ़ रहे हो, health का case study पढ़ रहे हो, और अगर मैं आपको क्वेश्चन दे देती हूँ हाउ डज हेल्थ act as a source of human capital formation and what are its challenges, that again means आप health का content from infrastructure human capital formation के आंसर में भी डाल सकते हो. So if you are okay with your content, you can interlink the lessons. कुछ isolation में नहीं पढ़ रहे हैं हम. Everything is related, so you can quote one portion from one place to another. Shashank, did I
Yes,
answer
ma'am.
anything? Anything else that I have to address? Any other thoughts? Any other method of national income that I can explain? बाद में याद आएगा, बाद में बता देना. That's not an issue. Fine. When we were talking about current challenges, if you recall, every chapter we've started by asking as to why exactly are we counting this as a challenge. Someone to offer me an explanation, environment or sustainable development को हम current challenges of the economy में क्यों include कर रहे हैं?
Ma'am, because the resources are scarce, and with the rising of population, the burden on resources has been increasing a lot. That's why.
Any other concern?
Ma'am, if we don't address the problem of sustainable development and environment now, then chances are that there won't be any ecosystem left for all the economic activities. So it will lead to an existential crisis.
Existential crisis is something else, but I can write it as environmental crisis.
Ma'am,
Anji?
for example, if we take the example of fuels, if we'll just use them recklessly, then it will pollute the environment. So there is a need of art to use them in a careful and in a careful manner.
Okay, if we do not do so, then again it leads to an environmental crisis. Maybe I can link that with Shivam's point. Anyone else who would want to offer any explanation? Why are we counting environment and sustainable development as a current challenge for us? क्या बात कर दी और हमारे पास कोई रीजंस ही नहीं है इसको चैलेंज के लिए काउंट करने के लिए. We just have two main reasons.
Ma'am, lifestyle of people, if there is no healthy ecosystem present, then lifestyle of people will deteriorate.
और कोई cause बताओ. Why exactly are we talking about environment as a challenge for us right now? What has led to such a situation for us? One I've
Glo-
got. Anji,
Global
global.
warming.
Well, I'll copy it as it is. If you remember, these were our reasons as to why do we have any economic problem where you're looking at limited resources. Alternate use is taken. Pollution is another aspect taken. Climate change is a result taken. Some people do not acknowledge climate change as a problem. Unfortunately, they happen to be the world leaders, so they fail to recognize this as a challenge. And your own prime minister. Affluent consumption and production standards. ये बहुत important है. Someone to explain what Arnav is talking about. Affluent consumption मतलब? If no one can explain what Arnav is talking about, that maybe Arnav can explain. To meet basic consumption standards. नहीं.
Ma'am, due to affluent consumption production standard of the world, the waste generated are beyond the absorptive capacity of the environment.
Thank you. When we're talking about affluent consumption, affluent basically means rich. So the way your rich countries are consuming and the way your rich countries are producing, they are harming the environment way more than other countries. Now, how exactly are they harming? Something as basic as buying a cloth. If you've seen any documentary about fast fashion, the way these people are producing recklessly, इतना कपड़ा बना रहे हो आप, इतना कॉटन को पहले साइंटिफिकली कैसे जल्दी से आप ग्रो कर रहे हो, उसको यूज करके आप कपड़ा बना रहे हो. पीपल बाय दैट एंड वंस दे बाय दैट एंड दे डिस्कार्ड इट, ये सारा कहाँ जाता है? ये सारा लैंडफिल्स में जा रहा है. This is not being disposed properly. So just because you want to wear different clothes on every day of the month and you don't want to repeat your clothes, you're basically spending so much on clothes. And if you're spending so much on clothes, there would be someone who will also be producing the same. Where exactly are those clothes going that you're discarding? जनरली या फिर तो आप किसी को चैरिटी में दे देते हो, हैंड मी डाउन्स हो जाते हैं वो. सो मे बी if I give my clothes out for charity or donation, someone else is wearing it. जब उन्होंने यूज कर लिया तो वो कहाँ जा रहे हैं? मे बी किसी और के पास जा रहे हैं. अल्टीमेटली जब वो खराब हो जाते हैं, फेंकने की हालत आ जाती है, और मे बी दे नॉट यूजेबल एनी मोर. वेयर एग्जैक्टली डज दैट गो? अब आपको अपना इतना वेस्ट हैंडल करना नहीं आता है. एंड दिस इज जस्ट वन कंजम्पशन दैट आई एम टेलिंग, दैट इज क्लोथ्स. The same can happen with other things also. So maybe this reckless consumption that we have, unlimited shopping happening, that is not exactly sustainable. With rising standards of living, people just take the resources as granted. So there is need for environment and sustainable development. Take conclusion. Population explosion and advent of industrial revolution. अर्नव बुक खोली हुई है ना, तो बंद कर दो. Technological advancements are needed.
May I explain the point of technological advancements?
बोलो, बिल्कुल.
Yeah, so ma'am, I was just reading an article the other day. It said that the technological advancements which are happening in our country or throughout the world are not in sync with the sustainable development goals. They are more profit-oriented technological advancements. Therefore, there has to be a shift towards in the in the pattern of technological research and developments, so that it can encompass the environment and sustainable development aspects in it.
This reminds me of this video. ये चला दो एक बारी. I really like this one. I mean, I'm so sorry I'm asking. I will obviously play.
Yeah, ma'am, sure.
I'll just play this one. I would want you people to see. अच्छी है. एक second.
There's a moment in your life where you just think enough is enough and you have to do something about it.
We came up with this idea to re-green our earth.
It's not normal that you try and create a high technology company that's farming millions of insects right in the heart of London.
The current production model is broken. It's not working. It's not sustainable.
The farms that we have are capable of growing pretty much anything you can imagine.
We have around 22 different crops. Bananas are different species.
Kale, chard, arugula, basil, mint,
Black soldier flies.
Our productivity is extremely high in a small footprint.
No fresh water, no feed, no fertilizer, no land, which makes it the most sustainable food on the planet.
The mere mention of the word logging brings a negative connotation. But what I'm doing here is taking care of nature, taking care of the forest, so that future generations can enjoy it. It's still there, you know.
We need to have crops and trees living together in the ecosystem. Agroforestry can exist everywhere in the tropical ecosystem around the world. This is one of the solutions to save the forest.
We need to use technology to scale up our restoration efforts. And the scale we're talking about is tens of billions of trees every year. It's a new step change in the way that we're thinking about global restoration.
To think that you can print the name of a fish on a menu and then demand that from the ecosystem causes those stocks to decline very rapidly. So you can no longer say, I want swordfish, or I want tuna, I want salmon, I want shrimp. There's no more I want.
For a small society like Palau, fragile environment, very limited resources, very limited opportunities, we have to basically live with the environment, maintaining the balance between harvesting and conserving. You're doing this to benefit your children. You're doing this because you have to think about tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the years coming.
We could produce 100 times the current level of seafood production from offshore aquaculture.
Successful companies in the 21st century, they really have to be not just making money and doing well, but doing good at the same time.
We can use all our innovation and all our ideas to leave this world in a better place than how we found it.
Everyone wants to feel that it's possible to do something, and if you've got a real hope story that you can transform, it becomes all possible and something that you can do.
I want to show people that green solution works.
Now people are starting to say, hey, what if? What else can we do?
We're on a crest of a wave, and it's all beginning to feel like it's got real momentum behind it.
Which is just mind-blowing that a simple change can have such a big difference.
Shivam, this was triggered from your point, where on one hand, where you're seeing in our country, we're bringing in technology so that we're just focusing on profit and economic gains, while other countries and individuals and companies are trying to work for sustainable solutions and technology that benefits not just individuals, but also keeps environment in mind. I'll tell you what, I just have one personal observation. The way sustainability is spoken about today, it's like everything is being put on us as individuals. So ठीक है, room से निकल रहे हो, lights off करो, walk shorter distances, don't take your car, use public transport. All of that, I agree with that, and I try to follow. So if I am going for grocery shopping, I will take my jute bag. I'll keep everything in mind. However, and your government is also trying to enforce. So जब आप odd even ला रहे हो, you are basically encouraging people either to carpool or to use public transport. My main problem comes up when, as main stakeholders who can actually make a decision, you are not keeping these checks on companies. So just in case something goes wrong, it is put on consumers and individuals as to what we're doing badly, but no one actually takes onus of what exactly is happening. Delhi में annual हो गया है अब pollution होना. So we have still not reached any solution as to how will we avoid the upcoming November pollution. Everyone ends up saying that Delhi has unsustainable lifestyle, Delhi is not taking things seriously. However, it is not exactly Delhi's fault what exactly happens. Let's stop blaming it on individuals, and maybe let's also take onus as government and major stakeholders for what exactly is happening in our city. I think someone wanted to say something.
Yeah, so ma'am, I'd like to say that this video was quite motivating. I liked this video only. But the thing about your point is that we are greedy people. Those stakeholders are at that position because, because they do not take environment in consideration, and they focus on profit. Investors want profit. We are greedy people. I won't deny that. So the thing about stakeholders taking an action, I think that they should be, forced to do so. Volunteering might not help in this case.
When you're saying forced, or when we want companies to implement something, we're basically with a collective vision. Many people are not on the same page. There was this one interview that I was seeing for UK's Prime Minister. They had it in their mind that they want to reduce their carbon footprint. Hamari government, how often are they talking about that? Rather, you're bringing in bills to cut down trees. आप बोलते हो कि यहाँ से काटेंगे और we will have reforestation happening, but that is again loss that has happened already. Unless you have initiated the plan, unless you have planted trees, you are messing with the nature. I don't understand when will people realize that if you mess with the nature, it will mess back. But again, you have to have a collective vision. We don't have that. अभी आपको सिर्फ profit चाहिए, अभी आपको सिर्फ पैसा कमाना है.
That's true, ma'am. But we can't really compare UK with India. I know that UK has ambitious goals of net zero carbon footprint becoming economy. But if you look at India, Indian people does not even have basic necessities. Government can't concentrate on environment when its people are dying hungry. In UK, the case is totally different. Those people are developed. Those people have food. Those people have basic necessities. India does not have that. Government must focus on the basic necessities first. It does not have funds or resources enough to, uh, give environment its share also, not and also help the people. It's actually a kind of impractical scenario we are talking about if we take India's case.
I agree with an irrational comparison, maybe, if you're looking at the economic status of India and UK. But at no point is it necessary for us to believe that we have to take the same economic trajectory of UK as India has to take the same economic trajectory as UK. पहले उन्होंने इतना आपका इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन आया है. It has to be the industrial revolution that has disturbed the equilibrium of the country, of the entire world. Just because they did that, आपका इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन आया, आपको इतने इकोनॉमिक गेन्स हुए, अब आपको अक्कल आ रही है कि नहीं, हमने तो बहुत रिसोर्सेज डिस्ट्रॉय कर दिए हैं, सो नाउ वी रिड्यूस आवर कार्बन फुटप्रिंट्स. इज इट नेसेसरी फॉर अस आल्सो टू फॉलो द सेम रूट, exploit the resources recklessly, damage the environment, have economic gains, and maybe after a century we realize, oh, ye to problem ho gayi. Why can't we find an alternate solution? Why do we have to follow the same development path? पहले आप economic development देखते रहो और फिर आप सोते सोते उठते हो that we've also harmed the environment. How about already bringing about a change? So if you're catering to the needs of your rural economy, how about have a sustainable model already? वो गलतियां क्यों repeat करनी जो किसी और ने कर दी है? Just because they committed that mistake and they harmed the environment and they gained out of it, I'm not denying that, does not mean that we also have to do the same. I don't know. I'm just a little too touchy about environment. So sorry.
Yeah, ma'am, that I really understand. But if we see in India, India has a 5-year election policy. So any party which comes, its main priority will be social development. I'm not talking about economic development. Government has certain less roles in economic development, but social welfare, if we see. But if we see take India's case, my point is that social welfare of Indian people and the economic this environmental salvation cannot go hand in hand in India's case, because there is exponential number of population and really scarce resources.
And ironically, we do have a ministry for environment and climate change, but we all know what exactly is happening. Okay, let's get down to the content of your lesson. One, why exactly are we talking about environment? Because our thirst for economic growth has harmed the environment. So it has come at a major environmental loss, at a cost of environmental loss, where you have used the resources so much and we have exploited our planet terribly. This gets worsened if you're looking at something like globalization happening. Now, globalization, if you personally ask me, was the stupidest thing we have done to ourselves. Again, it comes up with great economic benefits. No one denies that. लोगों को नौकरी मिली है, लोगों को consumption के लिए cheaper prices पे good मिला है, but that has also increased your carbon footprints, that has increased your production, that has increased the waste that your planet cannot absorb within itself. So just because of the greed of the foreign of your developed countries, and when globalization they brought in, they sold it to us as if we will also benefit without thinking the environmental aspects. Now that we are living in a globalized world and we are used to such lavish and affluent consumption patterns, it becomes a little difficult also to go back on the way. Given that we have globalization, given that we have these increased production patterns, how exactly can we bring in sustainability acts as a challenge? Talking about environment, how exactly your book defines environment, it is taking as total planetary inheritance and the totality of all resources. जब हम all resources की बात कर रहे हैं, we talking about biotic and abiotic elements. तो biotic हो गए basically your living beings. So you're talking about your plants, forests, human resources, animals, trees, etc. They go as your biotic elements. Abiotic हो जाते हैं when you're talking about, say, soil, you're talking about land, you're talking about water, you're talking about rocks and mountains. That will contribute to your abiotic elements of the environment. When we're talking about environment in its entirety, we're basically looking at an interaction between the biotic and the abiotic. So how exactly is the biotic, or if I say human resources, utilizing your biotic and abiotic resources, and the harm that we're causing goes as a part of the environmental studies. I would want you people to read this. This is a little too basic, and I have no idea why they give questions out of this. बहुत simple है. Please read this. Someone explain.
Ma'am, I think these points are quite self-explanatory.
Alright, just to go over them one by one, because for some reason they ask functions of environment. One, it is talking about it supplies resources. Resources में दोनों आ गए, renewable and non-renewable. So if you're relying on environment, you're basically using the resources for your benefit. I hope we know the difference between the two. So maybe I can ask you to give me examples of renewable resources. I can ask you to give me examples of non-renewable resources. As a one marker, I can give you examples of maybe 3-4 resources, and I can ask you to pick the odd one out. जिसमें से maybe एक renewable होगा और बाकी non-renewable होंगे, or the other way around. Then we're talking about it assimilates waste. Assimilates waste मतलब it takes it in itself. So whatever waste we are generating, या फिर आप landfills में कर दो, for some reason people drop it in oceans, for some reason people burn it out, different ways in which your environment takes in wastes. Now, waste disposal and waste management is also an entire course of study in itself. If you know about it, ये एक छोटा सा point लिख दिया इन्होंने, लेकिन एक बहुत बड़ा matter of research है ये. Next, it sustains life by providing genetic and biodiversity, which we are simply talking about in very simple words. It sustains life, offers life to us. Next, it provides aesthetic services like scenery, which can only be maintained if you ensure that your abiotic elements and your biotic elements are not messed around with. The fourth point talks about the opportunity cost of negative environmental impact. यहाँ पर ये क्या बात कर रहा है? It is they're simply saying that as long as you're carrying your activities within the carrying capacity, it is okay for the planet. When I'm saying carrying capacity, that simply means that the resources that you're using are less than the rate at which they are being regenerated. तो अगर मैं बोलती हूँ कि आप annually अर्थ का 1% ऑयल एक्सट्रैक्ट कर रहे हो और वो अगर रीजेनरेट अपने 2% पे होता है, so that is fine. That basically would then mean that we will not run out of resources. When does this become a problem? If you are extracting it at a higher rate than which it is being regenerated, then that becomes a problem, and that is what contributes to an environmental crisis. एक बार यहाँ पर ऊपर आओ, when we started discussing, talking about rising population. Why exactly is rising population a major cause for environmental crisis? Because you are consuming more. If you're consuming more, that basically means you're extracting more resources, and the more you extract, अब आपका nature उतनी ही speed पे regenerate कर सकता है. It cannot, you cannot intervene with the regeneration process. So if you are consuming more, that basically means more extraction and less of regeneration. That happens to be the footsteps for environmental crisis.
Ma'am, can we interlink this point with economic growth?
How do you plan to do that?
Ma'am, if the no, ma'am, actually the reverse of economic growth, if the population is increasing but the resources are not increasing at that rate, less people, the people are more but the resources are less. So with more of people, the resources are divided between those people, so it will lead to a slow economic growth.
Basically, per capita resource endowment.
Yes, ma'am. So, the question is, can we write about economic growth, the slow, in this chapter also, or we have to talk about the system development only?
We have to talk about sustainability only. One thing I can say, that the two of them can go on the same path. So if you're saying that your population rising and income not rising, so per capita income कम हो जाती है. वैसे population rising and resources not rising, so per capita resources also fall. So the concepts are more or less the same. However, they're not really related.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Next, when we're talking about using resources, ideally should be within the absorptive capacity. That basically means उतना ही waste generate कीजिए जितना आपका planet उसको absorb कर सकता है. Just in case we have crossed that threshold, again a knock at an environmental crisis. You will have no idea where to dispose your waste. जो हम आज करते हैं, जो unsustainable ways हैं, वैसे तो आपकी गवर्नमेंट ने सेटअप किया हुआ है different waste disposal plants that are there. जहां तक नहीं पहुंचे ये वेस्ट डिस्पोजल प्लांट, इजी होता है लोगों के लिए, जला दो. अच्छा, रिवर है उसमें फेंक दो, लैंडफिल है उसमें डाल दो. So you simply throw out waste of your houses, howsoever, doesn't mean that it is not impacting the environment. Personal level पे हम क्या कर सकते हैं? We can consume a little less. So maybe next time you go out for shopping and your parents offer you to चलो चलो बच्चा एक जोड़ा ले लो कपड़ों का. How about we say no? I will repeat clothes. I will not buy another set unless I'm done with the existing ones. क्योंकि आपका every money, every rupee that you spend, you're basically casting a vote to the kind of environment you want. The moment you buy more clothes, that basically gives a hint to these manufacturers कि बिक रहा है हमारा सामान, तो वो और बनाने लग जाएंगे, and the cycle will never end. अपने end पे हम क्या कर सकते हैं? Maybe consume a little less. We start with point 5 when we meet next. For now, I'm posting your attendance question. Please mark your attendance. We continue with this tomorrow.
Ma'am, I have another question.
Yeah.
During these October-November times, the states of Punjab, Haryana, the farmers of these states, they burn their crop residue. But nowadays, these people are also aware. They have TVs, internet, media, everything. Still, they are burning crops. I don't understand why. I mean, is there any political reason, or is there any? Why are they doing that when they could bury that residue, and this will, and after some time they will get good enriched soil, because if we see from science perspective, it will lead to more fertility of soil. So this is a good way of, treating the waste.
Shashank, have you read about them before
No,
asking me? Did you read about them?
I didn't read, but I have
This
collected
is
all these things.
this is easily available on Google. आप first में ही type कर दोगे why will these people burn, आपको पता चल जाएगा. So even if they know everything, they're still choosing to involve. Raghav has sent in the reply also. Anything you're curious about, just Google. पहला response आएगा महंगा है. If you heard on FM also, now they're promoting cheaper technology. कह रहे हैं आप ये टेक्नोलॉजी खरीद लो, आधा पैसा गवर्नमेंट डालती है, आधा पैसा आप डाल दो, so that this becomes easy. Just run a Google search, you'll have all your answers.
Okay, ma'am.
Anyone else?